Welcome to the Mayor of Money podcast with former Burlington Mayor Rick Goldring, CEO of Goldring Financial Leadership. In this podcast, we provide successful business owners with cutting-edge information and strategies in the areas of estate and financial planning, including wealth and risk management. The podcast also features exclusive interviews with very successful entrepreneurs that Rick has known and worked with during his career. Now, on to the show.
So with me today on the Mayor of Money is Riley Moynes. Riley's an author, he's an educator, he's a former financial advisor and investment advisor. He's had a fascinating career. You're the author of this great book, Riley, on the 4 phases of retirement, which we're certainly going to talk about shortly. But you've got a fascinating background. You were up in Thunder Bay. I don't know how long you were up there, but you were the director of education in the early 1980s in Thunder Bay.
Yep.
So I assumed you were a teacher before that.
Yep.
Did you always want to be an educator?
I think I decided that I wanted to be a teacher in about grade 12 when I had a wonderful history teacher. History was my focus. It's where I did my undergraduate work and in fact some graduate work as well. So history was my focus, and we had a wonderful history teacher in grade 12, and that kind of solidified my decision that I wanted to be a history teacher. And from that point on, I kind of focused my attention as far as the courses that I took to prepare me to do that, and ended up teaching as a secondary school teacher in North York for about 5 years in the classroom. And then I had an opportunity to go to the Royal Ontario Museum to teach in the galleries there. We had a secondment program back then, when each year there would be a teacher from one of the metro boards seconded to the Royal Ontario Museum. And I was lucky enough to be chosen for that. Then moved on for a couple of years to the Ministry of Education, where I saw education from a different perspective. Then I spent a couple of years in Cobourg, Ontario, as an area superintendent for the schools in Cobourg and Port Hope, and then was asked to consider applying for the role in Thunder Bay at Lakehead Board of Education, and was appointed there, and spent, as my wife describes it, 5 long years in Thunder Bay.
Was it 5 long years because of where you were or because of your job?
Well, it was a combination. It was tough for my wife. She's basically, we were Toronto people, and it was a big change for her. Given my role, people tended to be a little bit reluctant to get too close, and it was a little difficult in creating, friendships there for that reason. It was great for our kids because there was a tremendous range of sports activities that really didn't exist in the Toronto area when we were here that they participated in. And the truth is that it's one of those jobs that requires kind of 24/7 attention, and you spend hours and hours and nights at board meetings, and then a full day at the office. And after 5 years, I just decided that I was so far removed from education. I was really a politician at that point. My job was to ensure, if possible, that we had a majority of the votes when it came to proposals that we put before the board. We had a 19-member board. And so that was a full-time.
You were busy.
I was busy, yeah. And as I say, I really enjoyed the teaching, and I just realized how far away from it I had become. And so after 20 years in public education, I resigned, and we moved back to Toronto, and I became involved in the financial services area.
But obviously you did very well as a financial investment advisor and then retired ultimately, wrote this great little book, which we'll talk about very shortly. But Riley, when you look back, do you ever think, gee, I should have stayed in education for at least 35 years so I could have this, whopping big private or public sector pension
Rick, I try not to think about that. I really couldn't have imagined, frankly, that I could spend, the length of time that would be required to achieve that, doing something that I really had come not to enjoy very much. I really wanted to change, needed a change, and made the right change in my view.
So you became a financial advisor and you were very successful. You were with Asante for a number of years, and you retired a number of years ago. So you've been retired for a number of years. So you're good at retirement. You were good as a financial advisor. You were good in education. Now you're excelling at retirement, but it just didn't happen. And you've written this book called The 4 Phases of Retirement. That's a Canadian bestseller. It's what to expect when you're retiring. What prompted you to write this?
Well, what prompted me, I think, Rick, was that I was really experiencing some challenges in retirement. I was experiencing some real challenges. It wasn't what I thought it would be. What I thought it would be fun and games, lots of golf, walks on the beach, lots of travel, and that was part of it for sure. But that wasn't really sustainable for what for many baby boomers could be 1/3 of their lives, 30 years of retirement. So I was struggling. I didn't know what was going on. I was not as happy as I thought I should be in retirement. And so I started to do what I kind of always do, is I looked at, what's the research say? And what I discovered was that most of the research talks about the financial aspects of retirement and the estate planning aspects and all of that kind of stuff, wills, powers of attorney, important stuff for sure, and critical stuff for sure, but just not what I was looking for. So I decided then that the best way to kind of get at it was to interview people that I thought were successful retirees. And so I simply asked them if they would talk to me. And the question was, how do you squeeze all the juice out of retirement? And it went from there. And so I interviewed dozens and dozens, well over 100 retirees. And I spread out from those I thought were pretty successful to some who I was pretty sure weren't that successful at retirement. And I guess, as a teacher, what I always found was that if I could take information that at first glance kind of looked to be unconnected or maybe difficult to understand, and if I could kind of put it together in a framework that did make it easier for people to understand, that would have been a good teaching job. And that's really what I tried to do with the 4 phases. It kind of evolved. I certainly didn't have it set up in my mind when I began the process. It just kind of evolved. And what I found, particularly through response to my recent TED Talk, is that I've had hundreds and hundreds of comments from people who say, this absolutely describes my journey. This is me. I went through all of these. So it's been a reinforcement of the idea that this framework really can be helpful to people. I know that it was certainly helpful to me, and I thought it might be helpful to other people. As I say, I just wish I knew then, or I wish I knew now. I wish I knew then what I know now about retirement. It would have made things much easier for me. And that's what I hope that the book does. That's what I hope my TED Talk has done. And that's what I hope that my workshop does as well.
So there's, all kinds of people have retired from all sorts of different jobs, and some really love the work they're doing when they retire. Some really don't like it. Some are in high-powered, high-stress, but highly paid jobs that can't wait to get out when their numbers make sense. Some have predetermined retirements. Some people lose elections and have forced retirement that way. What are the commonalities that you've found with people when they do retire? What is that sort of initial stage that people go through? And is it different for everybody? Do people adapt really well quickly and then they struggle later on? Or is it they struggle first and then figure it out later on?
Well, it's hard to make broad statements that cover everyone, and I appreciate that. I would say, Rick, though, that I believe that about 80% of retirees experience what I have referred to as the 4 phases of retirement. And they tend to go through them approximately chronologically. There are exceptions, and we can talk about those in a moment. But let me kind of outline what I view as kind of what most people experience. So when most people retire, they have this idea that it's all about, as I said, it's all about travel. It's all about playing more golf, if that's what they do. It's maybe having a place in a warmer climate that they can escape to in the winter. Maybe it's whatever it might be. It's their vision of an ideal retirement. It's freedom. I do what I want when I want. I love it. There's no set routine. That's kind of most people's view of an ideal retirement, and it was mine. But what I've discovered through my many interviews is that after about 2 years or so, sometimes shorter, sometimes longer, people actually get bored. It's kind of like too much of a good thing is too much. And they kind of miss their routine. There's something in us, I'm convinced, that we're genetically wired to require a routine most of the time. I mean, we appreciate our holidays so much because there is no routine. But ultimately, when you're looking at a 30-year retirement or the possibility of a 30-year retirement, you need a routine. And people seem to come to understand that. And so all of a sudden they realize that they've really had a great time, but now they're bored. They don't have a routine. And they start questioning, like, is that all there is to retirement? And when they start asking those questions, then they've actually kind of moved into phase 2. And phase 2 is a time when most people suffer 5 significant but almost inevitable losses. They lose these 5 all at the same time. They lose that routine, which, as I say, is fine for a while, but ultimately we want a routine. We lose a sense of purpose often because we associate our jobs in many cases with ourselves. And when we lose that job, whether it be forced retirement or our own decision to retire, there's that loss of sense of purpose. There's also a loss, especially for males, a loss of identity, because I've interviewed dozens and dozens of people who have been retired for different periods of time, but they still refer to themselves as what they used to be: teachers, accountants, lawyers, doctors, whatever. And they need that sense of identity, but they know that it's been lost. They lose relationships that many people associate or come to develop through their work, and some of these relationships become lifelong friendships. And finally, some people, based on their situation, lose a sense of power. They may have acquired some significance in a company. They may have had some responsibility for staff or for budget, and all of a sudden that's gone. So we don't see these losses coming, but we lose them all at the same time. And it's kind of like, poof, gone. And it can be very traumatic for people. So those are the 5 predictable losses that almost everyone faces as a result of retirement in phase 2. Now, to make it even worse in phase 2, we face the 3 Ds. First of all, there is a very good likelihood. The Mayo Clinic, the world famous Mayo Clinic, says that there is a 40% likelihood that when you retire, you will experience aspects of clinical depression. So that happens at this time of our life, not necessarily related to retirement, but kind of that time of life. Secondly, there's decline, both physical and mental decline, that often coincides with that age of our life. And thirdly, there is a spike in divorce. Amazing statistics that I came across that are associated with divorce for people in their 60s and 70s. And all of this combination of the losses and these 3 Ds can make it a real challenge for people. And in fact, one of the most shocking statistics that I've ever discovered is that the highest rate of suicide in Canada today is men over 75.
Wow.
Shocking stuff. So that's associated with phase two that almost everyone faces. Now, the good news is that at some point, most of us say to ourselves or our spouses or a significant other, hey, I can't go on like this. I don't want to spend the rest of my life, perhaps 1/3 of my life, perhaps 30 years, feeling like this. And they begin to ask, what is it that they can do that's going to kind of make their life meaningful again? What's going to make them want to get up in the morning again? And the good news there is that when that happens, you've turned a corner and you've entered phase three. Phase three is when we get involved with trial and error. And what I mean by that is that in phase three, we start to cast around for some things. What is it that's going to make me want to get up in the morning again? What can I do to make my life meaningful? How can I squeeze all the juice out of retirement? And so it's important to try. But as I note, trial and error. And certainly there are many examples that people have cited for me of efforts in phase three that just didn't work. And I experienced probably a dozen of them myself. But it's important to keep at it, because if you don't keep trying in phase three, if you don't keep trial and erroring in phase three, there's a pretty good chance that you might slip back into phase two. And that is not a pretty sight. That's not a happy possibility. So that's phase three, trial and error, keep at it. Now, not everyone breaks through to phase four. Some people stay in phase one, some in phase two, unfortunately, and they may be among those statistics that we discussed. Some are in phase three, and some people kind of move back and forth among them. But what I can tell you is this, that based on all the conversations that I've had, that the happiest people that I have ever met are people in phase four. They have discovered something or some things that make them excited, that make them want to get up in the morning again, that make them want to get involved with as many things as they can. Maybe it's volunteering, maybe it's mentoring students, maybe it doesn't matter what it is. It's something that they do that makes them feel good. And what I discovered is that it almost always involves service to others. Service to others, whether it be, as I say, on a volunteer basis, or whether it be being paid for providing service for others. Those people are so exciting. They almost vibrate with excitement in the interviews that I had. And in many cases, they just don't have enough time in the day to do all the things that they want to do. So my suggestion is, from all of this, is to don't retire, at least in the traditional sense of the word. I use the phrase rewire. And I encourage people to take the things that they do well, that they love to do, that have led to success for them in the past, and to apply them perhaps in a different area, to rewire, to apply those strengths somewhere else that provides service to others and can provide a great sense of satisfaction. In a nutshell, those are the four phases that I've identified.
Yeah, when you mention service, I can't help think about Rotary. I'm a very proud member of the Rotary Club of Burlington Lakeshore, and Rotary is all about service above self. Absolutely. And it's fascinating how many retired folks we have in Rotary and all the different clubs who have contribute to the club, contribute to the community in such meaningful ways that they're better off, we're better off as a society. Absolutely. And there's many opportunities out there that a lot of people we just wouldn't think of under normal circumstances. Right. But they are out there. Absolutely. Yeah, they are. It's a matter of taking your skills, abilities, looking for those opportunities, because as you say, many of them are out there. An interesting study was done that kind of relates to the topic. The Harvard Business School conducted a longitudinal study, and a longitudinal 20-year study, and they interviewed 15,000 graduates of the Harvard Business School who had retired. And
among the many findings, the one that stood out for me was a statement that said that the unhappiest retirees of all had not gone on to do anything productive beyond pleasing themselves. Now, that's phase one behavior. There is a place and a time for phase one behavior. It's all about me, and I'm going to, check off my bucket list. And there is a time for that, but that can't represent your retirement. It cannot represent a third of your life. It's got to go beyond that. And the Harvard Business School and clubs like Rotary, I think, demonstrate that over and over again.
Yeah, it's fascinating that I have noticed that the meaning that people get out of their lives when they are contributing to others, they don't worry about themselves. They don't worry about their own issues. And as you get older, lots of people have health issues, and
Sure.
that's just part of it.
Yeah.
But when you have so much time on your own to think, that may not necessarily be good.
No.
And when you're busy, you're involved in your faith community, you're involved in volunteering, being part of a service club, being part of a condo board, whatever it is, you get much more meaning out of your life, and you get maybe distracted and focused away from some of your own issues, which so many people have, and you can't escape them, but you certainly can have a more meaningful life when you're not focused on yourself and you are contributing to others in some way.
Well, it comes back to that Harvard Business School quotation. Exactly right. Rick, I should mention two other things, if I may. One is that two of the assumptions that I make in proposing these 4 phases of retirement. Number one, it assumes a relatively stable financial situation. And number two, it assumes a relatively stable medical situation. I understand clearly that absent either or both of those, that retirement looks and can look very, very different. But given those two assumptions, I believe that the 4 phases have kind of held up over several years now, with people kind of confirming that, yes, this represents my path, my journey.
But I guess it's also how you look at your situation, that there's, people could be in the same financial situation. One would be very grateful and one would feel like they were hard done by. So it depends on what your mental outlook is. But certainly by being involved and contributing to others, you do get meaning in a big way, and can distract you maybe from some of your challenges.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, this is fascinating. So you've written this book. It's a Canadian bestseller. Where can people get it?
They can order it on Amazon.ca, and they can also order it on our website, the4phases.com.
The4phases.com.
Oh, great.
And you also have a TED Talk.
Yes.
And that TED Talk is on YouTube, I assume?
Yep. Yeah, the TED Talk was, yes, I delivered the TED Talk back in February in Vancouver, and it was released on YouTube a couple of months later. And we've just been astounded by the response. We've received over 1.1 million views of that TED Talk. And as I say, you do these things and you throw them out there, you have no idea what the response will be. But as a result of the TED Talk, people have contacted me really from around the world, from Iceland to South Africa to Australia to New Zealand to the Netherlands, the US and Canada. And what it says to me is that this topic is something that is really resonating with people, because for the most part, planning for retirement focuses on financial affairs and estate affairs. And again, they can't be ignored. But for the most part, it's been limited to that. And I think really what my TED Talk has done is it's shown to me that there is an interest in this psychological preparation and the kinds of things that are likely that we're going to experience in retirement. So I found it helpful for not only retirees who can kind of slot themselves and identify where they are in these 4 phases. And also, I hope, have a little bit of a blueprint as to how they might reach phase 4 if they should decide that that's their goal. And I would hope that it would be. And then the other thing is that for people who are not retired, I've been told that it kind of gives them a bit of a heads up as to what to expect, so that it will not hit them like it hit me, really without kind of any sense of order or organization or framework at all.
Well, Riley, I appreciate the discussion very much. I appreciate you sharing your wisdom, your insights, your perspective on retirement to the Mayor of Money podcast audience. Thank you very much, Riley, for taking time to be on the podcast. And I want to say thank you to everyone who's watching or listening to this podcast. We'll see you next time on the Mayor of Money.
Thank you for listening to the Mayor of Money podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. If you'd like to have a one-on-one discussion with Rick or have an idea for a particular guest or topic, contact him at rick@rickgoldring.com. See you next time on the Mayor of Money podcast.